Hi, it's Louisa Dahl, and welcome to the Interactive Minds podcast, where I talk with passionate marketers, innovators, and digital leaders about their specific recipes for success. In today's show, I interview Matt Clymo from NewsCorp, talking about generating proactive customer campaigns. Here's 3 things you're going to learn. 1, how a good proactive idea can go all the way to execution. 2, why you need to monitor and optimize well along the way. And 3, why it all comes back to having a good plan to execute on. Let's get into it. Today I'm here with Matthew Clymo, who is the Commercial Product and Trade Marketing Director at NewsCorp in Queensland. Matthew has been in the marketing space for over 15 years, with media roles forming a big part of that. He's worked for Southern Cross Austereo, APN Australian Regional Media, and now he's at NewsCorp. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, Louisa.
It's great that you can be here. So tell us a little bit about your, in brief, tell us about your career history to date. You've had a lot of different experience there.
Yeah, I think my career has been one of those interesting ones where, if you go back to university and thinking back then as a young kid what you wanted to do, and I have no idea what to do, but, through a few chance meetings, I ended up in a media cadetship down at the University of New South Wales many, many years ago, and met the sales director for what was then known as Austereo. So I apparently said something he liked, and he hired me. So my kind of career started off as literally a sales coordinator for the Triple M network in Sydney, and it kind of then just sort of grew from there. So, spent 8 years in radio. I saw a lot of opportunity in terms of actual sort of consumer and client research, because back then no one was really doing a whole lot of that sort of stuff from a sales perspective. So looking at how our audiences mirrored the clients and their markets. So I kind of created a bit of a role for myself doing research, and that kind of just grew from there over the next sort of, I suppose, 4 or 5 years. And I ended up becoming the head of sales research for the Southern Cross Austereo group under our research director there. So that was fantastic. It allowed me to work with lots of different clients from around the country. Again, being a national role, I got to sort of fly around the country and actually work with some of the biggest brands that we sort of have obviously in this country today. We got to a point where I couldn't really go to any further there. So I moved across client side to Suncorp and worked on some of the big brands under the Suncorp group there as a strategic brand advisor, and then kind of got lured back to media, to APN Regional Media, probably about, 6-7 years ago, to really head up their sort of strategy division for sales. When I say strategy division, it was me doing strategy for sales. So that was really sort of good. It was a bit of a challenge because it was something brand new for the company. They'd never really done that before. And being a regional media company, but based in all the metropolitan cities, it was a bit of a strange one, because again, I was dealing with the same brands I had dealt with from a consumer and a research point of view over in Australia. But then this time I was looking at developing campaigns and how we could really impact those audiences, taking, I suppose, the human insight into people, and how you then utilize that from a campaign perspective and really sort of make those campaigns work. So great. It was great.
A bit of a data kind of basis to your media experience by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I kind of see it as a bit of data from a research, bit of insight, a bit of sort of gut feel, and then obviously looking at just understanding how media actually works as well. So sort of blending all that together with a bit of creativeness is probably what I've sort of said is the key to my successes over the years, I suppose.
Yeah, well, you've certainly got plenty of experience in the media landscape. Yeah. Tell us about your current role.
So, NewsCorp bought APN ARM out about sort of 2.5-3 years ago now. So I moved across here as the commercial strategy director. And since then, through the course of a few restructures, I am now the commercial product and trade marketing director. So my job kind of is a little bit different from my old, I suppose, campaign strategy roles. But in saying that, that sort of those roles back in, I guess, the brand strategy and consumer behavior, and then also media strategy has really, really helped in this role, because I've been able to sort of bring both a commercial lens to the role and also a consumer sort of facing lens to the role, which, in product lane, you kind of need that. It's the old sort of, 3C sort of framework that I suppose people get touted around these days. But it's basically, if we can come up with a product that talks to our audiences or our customers, benefits us, and actually does something really, really good for us internally, and then also looking at how it intersects with both the brand and the category, then you kind of have a bit of a winner on your hands then. If it doesn't, it kind of falls flat in the face. So I'm kind of taking all those experiences into this role here. And then the trade marketing is completely different altogether, which is really a traditional B2B marketing role, but for a media company. So just trying to put all those learnings I've learned over the last 15 years into that to work out how we can elevate our brand presence and our consideration as a media company to I suppose agencies and clients out there across the board.
Yeah, it's quite a broad role that you've got. What would an average day look like for you?
I don't think
I love asking this question. I always get such a great response.
I don't think there is an average day for me.
That's right.
I can start my day off for anything from looking at P&L for one of our products to doing some yield analysis, as boring or as exciting as that sounds, depending on which way you want to sway, to looking at how we can come up with a brand new product for our audiences to try and, make an impact in the market, to looking at, how do we do a campaign for a certain clients across our product suite to do that. Or then I could be writing a storyboard for a 30-second media eye, for example, to promote our products, brands and mastheads into the agencies. So again, like my role now is kind of a cross between the data analytics, but also then the creative and the blend the creative and the insight together.
Yeah, brilliant. What do you think the best thing about your role is?
That's a tough question. Actually, I haven't really been asked that before. So I think the best thing about my role is probably the variety that I have across the day. And I'm the sort of person that gets bored pretty easily doing the same thing over and over. I could never have been an accountant, to put it that way. So I think having that blend of being able to use my analytical half of my brain to look at the business problems and how we solve those business problems, and then also to go, well, how can I do something a bit more creative and come up with solutions that sort of help us and help our clients, and then having the variety amongst those things. So for me, I think that's good. It's having that variety, because I know when I come to work every day, it's going to be something different, or there's going to be a new challenge. And I think I've always been a natural sort of problem solver ever since I was a young kid, with my I think year 5 teacher nominating me to go to talent camp for problem solving, which I wasn't too thrilled about back then. So
well, you're putting it to use now. That's great. And I agree. I think that variety and creativity is something that a lot of people look for and value in a role.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk today a little bit about a campaign in particular that you've worked on. And I know when we were talking about this a little bit earlier that we were talking about how being proactive in some campaign planning can really pay off.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about this particular campaign that you worked on and how it came about?
Yeah, so part of it's not really part of my role at the moment, but I still kind of moonlight on the regional side of the business. So in doing that, probably about close to 18 months ago, myself and one of my good friends and also work colleagues down in Sydney, Heidi Sayers, she was talking to me and said, how do we do a really cool campaign that would target regional businesses? And I said, well, there's probably a few things we could do. So we kind of sat down and had a bit of a brainstorming session and noted out a few rough ideas. And off the back of a range of campaigns we'd already done previously together that were quite successful, we came up with a bit of an idea which we thought we could pitch to market, but we kind of went, we need something that would give us a bit more pizzazz, I suppose, or gave us a bit of a leverage amongst other media companies and also for the audiences. And by chance, she happened to be friends with a girl called Lauren Miller, who is CEO of the Harrier Miller group of, talent agencies. And on her books was Naomi Simpson. So most people know Naomi Simpson as the red shark from Shark Tank, but she's also the founder of Red Balloon, and then has her own sort of company and does that. She's also, I think, one of the most successful, I suppose, business to business people or business women in the country. And, she has a massive following on LinkedIn. Like, she's in the top, I think, 20 have LinkedIn followers of the world. So we thought it'd be really great if we get her on board as a bit of an ambassador. So after a few conversations, she agreed to come on board because she thought, you know what, this is a really great initiative to take to marketplace. And basically what that initiative was us coming up with a way to really help engage and give small business owners out there in regional areas content that they could kind of read and engage with that would actually help them out in their everyday lives. So I guess when I sort of was taking this to market and presenting it, I kind of said this was both an inspirational and educational and informative kind of series. So it kind of had to tick all those sort of 3 boxes for the clients. So we came up with this thing called, back then the working name was the Small Business Super Series, but it was ended up renaming to Business Class, I guess, because it's got aspirations of being in business class, and it was also a classroom. So kind of did a
nice play on words,
double meaning and play on words there. So I had to thank the creative guys for that one, because that wasn't my one, but they did that. So that kind of came about. So we had this entire sort of campaign that we mapped out across a 6 to 8 week kind of period, which would be, learnings coming from Naomi that she would sort of talk about. It would then be us asking our audiences, or our business audiences, about what kind of kept them up at night. So, it was everything from how to attract the right staff to how do I utilize social media for my business, or, what's the best way to market a business, cost effectively, etc. So just a range of all those things that keep those small business owners up at night. So we did this campaign, we crafted that campaign, and we ended up taking it to market and start pitching it. So we understood our audiences, what they kind of wanted. We knew there was a gap in the market there because no one else was really doing this outside probably the big 4 banks. And as we know, the big 4 banks have really got not the best stigma about them these days, especially after the Royal Commission. So we wanted to, fill a gap in the market and actually give something that sort of gave back to small businesses in communities. And at the end of the day, our regional sort of titles, news media titles, that's what they're about. They're about, advocating, informing, and being there for that community and being the voice of the community. So that's what we did. That's what we wanted to do it. So that's how it was all sort of formed.
How it came about. Yeah, so this campaign, when you just let me recap on a couple of things there. The target audience for this is the regional businesses. So you wanted them to read the publications, which in this case were physical newspapers as well as online. Was that the format? Yeah, so I guess I can give you a very brief synopsis of, I suppose, how the campaign played out, if you like. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, so in most people think of news media as traditional newspapers. But the way it is these days, obviously, it's a lot of stuff is online. And in fact, half of our audiences are online, half our audiences are in print, and there's a bit of a crossover. So any of these campaigns that we do these days, and what I wanted to do was it had to have a strong online component. So in this instance, it was actually an online campaign with a supported print component. So what we did, we developed a content hub, which we branded as Business Class, with Naomi Simpson as our ambassador. And that housed all our articles that we were writing in-house and that were coming from her to, again, sort of, educate, inspire, and inform the small business community. So we know we've got a really strong traction in those regions with small business owners. So it was kind of like the perfect platform. And being online meant that they can kind of access it either on the mobile, tablets, laptops, desktops, wherever they were out and about, etc. So that was fantastic. So we had that as probably the main key component. And then each week in print, in our business section, we did kind of a weekly wrap up. So that's why I sort of said the print was probably the support mechanism in this case, because it wasn't the hero, it was the supporting element of it. So just a wrap up, I guess, of the week that was. And we kind of divided those weeks then into I guess, loose themes that we kind of talk about. So that way the audience could follow it. And obviously, Naomi could sort of talk to that in her expertise as well. So we mapped that out across sort of 6 weeks and it rolled out. And as part of that, we promoted it really heavily across all our assets, because I'm kind of a big believer in that if we're going to be trying to solve
problems with solutions using our media assets for our clients, we probably should do the same for ourselves. So that was a big thing for me. So, promoting across all our assets in print and online. And then as I said, we had that 360 sort of feedback loop through social media to actually ascertain what business owners were thinking and feeling, and actually sort of to help craft that content. So it was kind of a little bit like UGC in that regard, but sort of meaningful to help us write that. So, because at the end of the day, those people are both our audiences and the businesses that we're trying to support. So understanding them was key. So we rolled that out, and then as part of that, to really hype it up, we did a competition where Naomi kindly donated an hour of her time to do like a strategy session with one of those small business owners. So the end of the competition. So, and again, that's kind of invaluable because she doesn't really do that very often.
Yeah, great. What a cool prize.
Yeah.
And in this particular instance, from my understanding, you guys came up with this concept in-house. You obviously had the connection with Naomi.
We did.
And once you'd put together the campaign outline and how it could work, you then pitched that to potential partners to come on board and brand it and be behind it. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, pretty much. You're pretty spot on there, Louisa. So we came up with the concept in-house. I've always been proud of the fact that we've done this with a fairly small group of people. It's amazing what you can get done with just 3 or 4 people versus a raft. So came with in-house, following the concept, designed the proposal and the elements. We liaised with Naomi and her management to get her buy-in and blessing, I suppose. And based on that, we then sort of, I guess, compiled a list of probably about no more than 20 clients around the country we wanted to take this to, because at the end of the day, we really wanted to target big business that had a vested interest in small business. So we did take it to people like Westpac and ANZ, and we took it to Allianz, etc. We had quite a lot of discussions with Optus at the time, which was good. But we actually ended up landing with BizCover. So for those people that don't know, BizCover is like a business insurance aggregator, a little bit like your iSelect or you Compare the Markets, but purely just in business insurance. And they kind of want to be, I suppose, the experts of business insurance as well as the aggregator as well. So,
nice.
And if I come back, I guess, to those, as I said, like a 3 C's approach kind of methodology, that worked brilliantly for them because we had a campaign that we knew would solve a problem for our audiences and provide them a solution and a great engaging campaign. And then on the other hand, we had a client like BizCover that really wanted to elevate their presence in market and saw the fact that the low-hanging fruit was probably in regional, because let's face it, in the major cities like Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, etc., they're quite saturated markets, whereas regional is nowhere near as saturated. So it's actually a really good testing ground for clients like BizCover who don't have the big budgets of like your NABs or your Westpacs to really go in, do something different, unique, and actually try and make an impact in those communities, which then also makes an impact for both us and their brands.
Yeah, great. And do you find, I love seeing these examples of proactive campaigns where a great idea comes around because it's really a great idea and not just because it's a response to a brief. How do you find the clients are in response to those kind of proactive ideas versus something that they're pushing at the time?
Yeah, look, I suppose there's a different response to either side of that question is, I think if you've got a really great proactive idea that why it will work, and you've got, I guess, the research or the insight of the data to back that up, and you then understood what, I suppose, the industry and the category needs are. And I guess that's the big point with these things is too often I see people going up with these proactive ideas to clients and they actually have no kind of clue or very little understanding of how the category works or how the clients and the brands in that category works. So I guess in this instance, when we're talking to BizCover, I suppose I had the benefit of working with commercial insurance brands under the Suncorp group when I was there. So I had a bit of an understanding of what that category was actually like and what that kind of meant. So I was able to actually talk kind of a similar language to, I suppose, to the guys actually at BizCover. So for me, that's kind of key with these proactive ideas. It's really important to understand the link between your assets, your audiences, and what they're trying to achieve. So once you do that, it makes the conversation a lot easier. And I suppose on the flip side, if you have a brief response, it's almost the same thing, which is, don't go back answering the brief with just some random idea or a solution that might work or might fit. It's really understanding how that idea really works to solve a problem that client has. So what's the solution? And that's kind of what I've always said across the years, which is, what we should be pitching is solutions to clients' problems, not just campaigns for the sake of it. So, and the ones that you do that with really well, then actually really work. They work for the audiences, they work for the brands.
Yeah, definitely. So tell us a little bit more about this campaign. How long did the campaign run for, and what kind of outcomes were you looking for your client at that point?
Well, basically the actual campaign itself, the core part of the campaign ran for around 6 weeks. So it was a 6-week content series, as I sort of mentioned before. We led in with a bit of pre-promote to start with, and we did some follow-up stories at the back end of it on the actual winner of the super session with the Amy's. So all up, it was probably around sort of 8 to 9 weeks in total. We sat down and worked with the client for their objectives, and I guess that's another key part to this as well, which was, it's all well and good to run a campaign with a great idea, but if you don't understand the client's objectives and what the measurements are going to be and what they classify as success, it's really hard to sort of then quantify that. Yeah. So we sat down with the CMO of BizCover, talked about their metrics, what they want to achieve, and what their exposed issues were in the markets, and really worked hard to do that. So at the end of it, then we actually put into place a survey in markets to showcase the effectiveness of the brand, because at the end of the day, BizCover was about elevating their brand metrics, because they're a relatively, I suppose, unknown brand in the marketplace. So we really had to get their name out there and then get them into the top of consideration set for people who are, choosing business insurance.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So what kind of metrics were they looking at for this campaign? So brand obviously being one of them.
So I guess brand awareness, because again, they had low awareness in certain markets. And then on top of that, it was almost like a brand or purchase funnel 101 to a certain extent with these guys, which was, they wanted to get the brand awareness out there because they would need to, improve their consideration amongst the target market. Because at the end of the day, these guys, live and breathe and die by the number of leads that come through in conversions. So, the more, and again, it's a typical sort of, I said, funnel 101. The more awareness you can get out there, the more people sort of consider it, the more people that consider it, the more leads that come through, the more leads that come through, the more they can convert. So for them, it was really about the top of the funnel. And from the top of the funnel, through that awareness and that consideration, so it would, means that people would click on the links and go through the websites, or pick up the phone and call them to ask for quotes or inquire about certain insurance products, et cetera, et cetera. So that would then improve their conversion. So for them, that was a big key thing. So awareness and consideration. And then obviously to a lesser extent, your brand affinity is probably also important too, because affinity and consideration are kind of linked. So for them, it was about people feeling positive about them and their brand, what they're doing, and linking with like a thought leadership or an educational series like this really, really helped in that regard. So people, kind of thought they actually know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about. They can help me, they know my business, so therefore I'm much more likely to go with them. So it was those metrics.
Yeah. And are you able to share any of the results that came from this campaign?
Yes, I can share results actually. So in terms of our top line results for the client, and at the end of the day, it's really what this does for the client. So it's not so much what it does internally. I suppose our internal metrics are more about how we push it and agitate and make it work. But for them, it had quite a massive impact. The campaign, had over 30,000 page views to the content online, which was massive. And the average time that people actually spend on this content, and this is probably a big thing as well, is usually a lot more than what the average time people spend on just your general sort of news articles online, etc. So I think it was close to 100% increase on average time spent. Great. And then that kind of translated for the client into a 62% increase in awareness of their brand. So, in the post study,
Nice.
it showed that, it made a massive increase in their awareness. And again, they are coming off a bit of a lower base, but at the end of the day, that's a great thing because it means that there's so many more people out there who are now aware of who they are, what they actually do. In terms, I mentioned affinity before and how consideration and affinity is kind of linked. 40% of people actually have this really great positive association with the BizCover brand. So for us, that meant that we're doing our job in connecting our content and their brand kind of together to actually create that affinity. And as a result, it actually increased consideration by about 27% in the market.
Wow.
And then I guess the big thing is, which every brand talks about, is all that stuff's great, but if people don't do anything, then the campaign isn't really a success, right? So
Yes.
over a third of people actually then took action as a result of that campaign. And when we say take action, they did anything from talk to friends and family about it, to search for more on the products, on the brands, to pick up the phone, call, go to the website, get a quote, etc. So,
Wow.
But that's the thing.
Cool.
It's actionable outcomes is what we're sort of after.
Yeah, and I mean, to get that kind of level of tracking, I guess you'd need to make sure everything's linked up pretty well there. Do you have any tips or things that you had to make sure that we're all connected to be able to get those kind of results?
Yeah, I think with a campaign like this, it's understanding what the campaign's designed to do and having a goal in mind. For me, that's kind of a big thing. If you don't have that goal in mind, it's really hard to hit something. So even if it's a benchmark that you have internally, you don't share with anybody else, you still have that goal. And then it's making sure that you're monitoring the campaign, on a regular basis. So it might be every couple of days to see how it's tracking, and making sure that people are actually, seeing the content, reading it, clicking the links or the ads or whatever you've got embedded in the content itself, interacting on social media, and then actually sort of, I suppose, hitting the website. So, we worked pretty closely with them to make sure that was working for them and that they were happy with the results they were seeing on their end. And then we obviously worked really, really hard internally to make sure that what we did really pushed the content, made the content as readily available as possible across our news sites.
Yeah, nice. And after doing this campaign, what were some of your kind of learnings or next steps from here? Where do you see this kind of approach going down the track, or is there anything that you'd kind of recommend for people who are considering something like this?
Yeah, so I suppose my first answer is, we're looking at now utilising this as a bit of a framework and a base to create an evergreen or an ongoing kind of campaign across all our sort of regional and community websites across the country. So obviously we have massive scale and we're across sort of 5 or 6 states with our company. So that's a big endeavour, but we're after sort of a client to come on board to partner with us on that to help us out. So that's probably the next steps there, which is now sort of taking this to markets and really sort of trying to see who wants to buy into it, and then also how do we then create that content to be ongoing and to live as evergreen on our websites and in print as well. And Naomi has kindly agreed to come on board and continue to be the ambassador for this as well in its large iteration or its national iteration. So that's probably, I guess, the answer to your first part. What was the second question? The learnings, was it?
Yeah, so if anyone else is kind of, looking, I guess, at how they can maybe partner or use assets in a different way to achieve something on scale like this, would you have any advice or recommendations for them?
Yeah, there's probably a few. One, probably don't involve too many people, depending on, I guess, the organisation or the brands that you're working for, because I think with too many people you get too many different ideas and it gets hard to sort of narrow your focus. With these sorts of campaigns, it's really important to have that, I suppose, laser focus on what you're trying to do, what your plan of attack is, and what your outcomes are. So that makes it easier with a smaller working group of people, which is probably one big key learning. The other key learning, as I think I said before, which is it's just monitoring and optimizing, because that's how these campaigns can actually be really successful or not successful. If you just kind of set them and then forget them, they don't work as well. If you live and breathe it and actually really project manage it really, really well, then they go extremely well and they get great results for both, I suppose, our audience and also the client. At the end of the day, that's what we're here to do, is make our online and in print sort of experience and content for our readers really valuable and engaging, and then in return, that translates to results for the clients that partner with us.
Yeah. When you do optimize on the fly like that and, make sure you're project managing it well, what kinds of scope do you have to improve it along the way?
You have various degrees of scope, I suppose. It's, it's monitoring, I suppose, the articles. So if we're writing stories on certain topics and themes, and so they're resonating more because they're getting, I guess, more engagement, more hits, more time spent on those online stories and articles, then it's how do you create more of that stuff to help that to really boost the audience up. The same thing goes with social media. It's what posts resonates and what don't, and actually looking at the data analytics behind that. And then once you've kind of assessed that, it's how can you amplify that, and how can you keep kind of driving it? So which ones do you promote? Which ones don't you promote? For us, because we're a news media site, we have the ability to then have those articles be surfaced across other parts of the sites in relevant articles and relevant links, and then link back to the campaign itself. So, because we are a media company, we can actually do that within our own assets fairly easily, and it's not a matter of manipulating levers across different media platforms like TV or radio, for example, to do that. But in saying that, then if you did have other media platforms doing this, it's just making sure that each of those media platforms have their purpose, their reason for being, and they all work together, and everyone's on the same page, knowing what you're doing when. So that would mean you have to have a very probably clear plan of attack and a really clear marketing or a media schedule to work off to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page, doing what they need to do when they need to do it. Yeah,
definitely. I guess that's the same for any well-executed campaign, isn't it? Making sure that that's all upfront and figured out in advance.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's planning is everything in these things, and executing the plan is, if you've done it well, then it shouldn't be too hard. But if you don't have a good plan in place, then it's really, really hard to execute properly. And if you don't, then it's hard to then, I guess, rectify anything that goes wrong on the fly, because, in today's world, people are quite fickle, and obviously, if you make the mistake, it's really hard to get those people back again. So you've got to make sure that you do it sort of really well and do it right the first time.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Matt, you know that I'm always interested in how people work and making sure that we're being as efficient as possible.
Yep.
So along those lines, I know you've got quite a broad role that covers lots of different things. How do you organise your time? Do you have any specific approaches that you use to make sure you have time to get the important things done?
Yeah, so I think with my role, it's because it's so broad, as you mentioned, and it's always changing, and every day is a little bit different. I don't have sort of set tasks I have to do every day. For me, it's sitting down at the start of the day and looking at what the priorities are. We have a saying, I suppose, here in news, which is, what's going to make the boat go faster. So for me, it's if I've got tasks and things I need to get done that isn't going to make the boat go faster, i.e. sort of drive revenue and results for us, then I kind of deprioritize those things. Some of those things have to get done, so you do have to put them up the top of the list sometimes, but most of the time it's what are the things are the big things that you need to get done first that require the most brain power that you want to sort of do, and then you just schedule your day out around that. I have lots of meetings internally, so I'm always jumping from meeting to meeting. So for me, actually getting the actual work done is always the tricky part, so you've just got to prioritize those big sort of challenging tasks quite well, and then all those the smaller emails or the admin sort of stuff that can kind of be done later in the day when you've got the rest of the stuff done, because that's the stuff that doesn't require as much brain power. So it's doing the stuff that matters when you're fresh to do it, and for me, that's probably the key part to it, and just writing it down, just making sure you do it, and then revising it every day as you go through each day and a week. So and we also do a thing here where we do like a little huddle every morning with our team. So we just go through what's on for the day and who's got what priorities, and we can just then manage workloads and workflow across the team doing that. And that seems really good because it means it's transparent. Everyone's accountable for it. And, and we kind of make it a little bit of fun as well. So it's not an arduous task. It's 5 minutes every morning. What's on, top priorities for the day, what are we going to get done, what can we cross off the board.
Great. Excellent. And do you have any techniques that you use to prioritize your calendar or your inbox to make sure that you have the time that you need?
I suppose I don't have so many, certain techniques. It is really just that. It's understand what my role is within the company. And looking at my tasks, and anything that doesn't fall within that sort of really important remit, I just do deprioritize. And then same with meetings as well. We can get caught up in meetings for the sake of meetings. So I have to be very mindful of my time. So I just make sure that if people are requesting my time for a meeting, for example, then it's, is it necessary, or is it literally just a 5-minute conversation I can just have at your desk? It's understanding what the purpose is and what the outcomes are, and making sure there actually is a purpose and there are outcomes to those meetings, and not just sitting around talking about stuff for the sake of it.
Yeah, definitely. Easy to stumble into and then realize that it's not as productive as you were hoping.
No, that's right. And it reminds me of that old sort of, the video interview that, I guess many people have seen before between, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. And Warren Buffett has 3 meetings in the course of 2 weeks, and Bill Gates' diary is full. And Warren Buffett is like, well, those are the important things I need to tackle. Everything else can just, isn't as important. If it's not going to make me money, then I don't care about it. It's that laser focus. And I think, coming from someone like him, he can kind of teach us all lessons that if you're not laser focused on your goals and objectives, it's going to make it really, really hard to achieve them. And, from a brand, if you think about it from a brand perspective, if you try and target everybody, you end up targeting nobody, right? So it's the same with my workload. It's do the most important things, have that focus, and that way you actually achieve the goals and get what you need done.
Yeah, a great reminder.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show here today. If people want to get in touch with you or connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, just under my name. So I think it's just LinkedIn / Matthew Clymo. Alternatively, you can find my email address, and my phone number is actually on there as well. So if they want to get in contact with me, they can hit me up with that, or find me on Facebook. I'm kind of pretty contactable.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for being on the show and for sharing some of your expertise and knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. See you next time.
No problems. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe, and we'd value you leaving us a review. My recommended action item from today's show is to look at what you can do to make the boat go faster. I love this saying from Matt. Please join me in the Interactive Minds Facebook group, where there are several hundred marketers asking questions, sharing advice, and staying motivated. You can access today's show notes at interactiveminds.com/podcast. See you next week.